In the lush heart of an upscale neighborhood stood the property that could change my life. The price tag alone, $1.5 million, screamed luxury, but as I walked through its opulent hallways beside my husband Nathan, a sense of unease gnawed at me. "Meredith, look at this place." Nathan's eyes sparkled with an almost childlike glee. "Imagine us here, hosting parties, living the dream." I tried to mirror his enthusiasm, but a voice inside me whispered caution. "It's stunning, Nathan, but the price. Can we really manage this, even with Dad's help?" Nathan laughed, his voice echoing in the grand foyer. "Your dad won't mind. He's got more than enough. This is our chance, Meredith. Our future." His words felt like a mask slipping, revealing a glimmer of greed I hadn't seen before. We continued the tour in silence until we reached the garden. The real estate agent, a sharply dressed man named Mr. Collins, excused himself to take a call. "Go on out, Nathan. I'll catch up," I said, needing a moment alone. Nathan nodded and stepped outside. That's when Mr. Collins returned, his face unusually somber. "Mrs. Thompson, I need a word, in private," his tone urgent. Puzzled, I followed him into a small study. He closed the door with a definitive click and turned to face me. "Mrs. Thompson, what I'm about to say must stay between us. Your husband, Nathan, he's involved in something illegal." My heart skipped a beat. "What? That's impossible. Nathan's a good man." Mr. Collins sighed, his eyes holding a gravity I hadn't noticed before. "I have friends in law enforcement. They've been tracking a drug ring and Nathan's name came up. I can't divulge more, but you should know." I felt my world tilt. Nathan involved in drugs? It couldn't be. Yet, hadn't I sensed something off? "You need to leave him, Mrs. Thompson, for your safety," Mr. Collins added. A bitter laugh escaped me. "You expect me to end my marriage based on this?" Mr. Collins's gaze was steady. "I understand this is hard to accept. Just be careful. Consider what I've said." I left the room in a daze, the lavish walls of the house now feeling like a gilded cage. Outside, Nathan was admiring the garden, oblivious to the storm raging in my mind. "Everything okay, honey?" he asked, wrapping an arm around my waist. "Yeah, just a bit overwhelmed by all this," I lied, forcing a smile. As we drove home, Nathan chattered about the house, our future, his dreams, but my thoughts were a whirlwind of doubt and fear. Was the man I married not who I thought he was? The words of Mr. Collins echoed in my mind, a sinister undercurrent to Nathan's enthusiastic plans. That night, as Nathan slept beside me, his face peaceful in the moonlight, I made a decision. I needed the truth. And if Nathan was the man Mr. Collins claimed he was, then I would make him pay. For my heart, for my trust, for everything. Revenge, a word I never thought would belong to me, settled in my heart. Nathan had chosen his path. Now it was time to choose mine. Months before the property viewing, life with Nathan seemed almost idyllic. We were the couple our friends envied. Always laughing, always together. But as I lay awake that night, the past replayed in my mind, revealing cracks I had chosen to ignore. "Meredith, I'll be out late tonight. Drinks with the guys," Nathan had said one evening, his tone casual. I remembered nodding, a smile fixed on my face. "Sure, have fun. Just don't stay out too late." As I thought back, I realized these late nights had become more frequent. Nathan, once eager to spend every moment with me, now seemed to find any excuse to be away. I had dismissed it as pre-marriage jitters, the last hurrahs of bachelorhood. But now, doubt crept in like a shadow. The following morning, I decided to confront Nathan. Over breakfast, I broached the subject. "Nathan, we need to talk. You've been out a lot lately? Is everything okay?" He looked up from his coffee, a flicker of annoyance in his eyes. "It's nothing, Meredith. Just enjoying my freedom while I can. You know, before the ball and chain." His words stung, and I pushed back my chair, standing up. "Is that how you see our marriage? A ball and chain?" Nathan's expression softened, and he reached for my hand. "I didn't mean it like that, Meredith. I love you. I'm just getting it all out of my system." I wanted to believe him, to return to the blissful ignorance I had basked in. But the seed of doubt Mr. Collins planted refused to be ignored. That afternoon, I called my best friend Lisa, seeking a sounding board. "Lisa, do you think I'm overreacting? Nathan's been so distant lately." Lisa's voice was hesitant. "Meredith, you know I love you both, but I've seen Nathan out. He's not always with the guys." Her words were a punch to my gut. "What do you mean?" "He's been seen around town with some unsavory characters." I didn't want to say anything, but I felt a chill run down my spine. Nathan's late nights, his evasive answers, and now Mr. Collins's warning, it all began to form a sinister picture. Over the next few days, I observed Nathan. His phone, once left carelessly around the house, was now always on him, buzzing with constant messages. His once warm demeanor towards me cooled, replaced by a detached politeness. One evening, as Nathan prepared for another night out, I confronted him again. "Nathan, who are you meeting tonight? You're always so secretive." He paused, his back to me. "Just some old friends. You wouldn't know them." The lie was evident, and I felt a surge of anger. "Nathan, I'm your wife. If there's something going on, you can tell me." He turned, his eyes hard. "There's nothing to tell, Meredith. Just drop it." As he left, slamming the door behind him, I felt a resolve harden within me. Nathan was hiding something, and I was going to find out what. No more excuses, no more lies. I was done playing the dutiful, oblivious wife. That night, as I sat alone in our cold, silent house, I knew one thing for certain. The man I married was a stranger, and I was going to uncover the truth, no matter the cost. The ensuing days felt like walking through a thick fog. Each smile Nathan flashed, every affectionate gesture now seemed tainted with duplicity. I watched him, the man I had pledged my life to, with a skeptic's eye, searching for the truth behind his mask. One evening, as we sat in our living room surrounded by real estate brochures, Nathan's true nature began to emerge more clearly. "Meredith, look at this one," he said, pointing to a brochure featuring a mansion that screamed opulence. "Your dad won't mind footing the bill for this, right?" I felt a pang of disgust at his casual expectation of my father's wealth. "Nathan, we need to be realistic. We can't exploit my father's generosity." He laughed, a sound that once warmed my heart, now chilling it. "Come on, Meredith. Your dad's loaded. He'd want his little girl to live in luxury." I stared at him, the man I thought I knew, now a stranger driven by greed. "My father's money isn't a ticket to your lavish fantasies, Nathan." His face darkened, and for a moment I saw the man Mr. Collins had warned me about. "So what? You're choosing your dad over me?" I stood up, my hands trembling with a mix of anger and hurt. "This isn't about choosing sides, it's about respect and responsibility, something you seem to have forgotten." Nathan stood as well, his eyes flashing with something akin to fury. "You know what, Meredith? Maybe you're the one who's forgotten what this marriage is about." I felt a cold resolve settle over me. "And what is that, Nathan? Using me for my father's money?" He didn't respond, turning away with a dismissive wave of his hand. That night, I lay in bed, the space between us wider than the physical distance. My mind was made up. I needed to protect myself and my family from this man who had become an embodiment of betrayal. The following day, I made a call to a private investigator. If Nathan wouldn't give me the truth, I would find it myself. I recounted Nathan's late nights, his sudden interest in expensive properties, and Mr. Collins's alarming revelation. "I need to know what he's hiding," I told the investigator. "I need evidence." As I set the plan in motion, a part of me mourned the loss of the love I once felt, but that grief was overshadowed by a burning desire for justice. Nathan had made his choice, and now I was making mine. Weeks passed, and the investigator provided me with updates. Nathan's business meetings were nothing more than rendezvous with known criminals. The late nights were not spent with friends, but in shady dealings. Each report was a nail in the coffin of our marriage. I confronted Nathan one last time, armed with the evidence. "I know about your dealings, Nathan. I know about the people you've been meeting." His reaction was not of remorse, but of rage. "You had me followed? You spied on me?" "Yes, because you left me no choice," I said, my voice steady despite the turmoil inside. "I trusted you, Nathan, and you betrayed me." He scoffed, turning away. "You're just like everyone else. You don't understand what it takes to make it in this world." As he left the room, I knew there was no turning back. I had seen the real Nathan, a man consumed by greed and deceit, and I would not let him destroy me. I would fight back with every resource at my disposal. Nathan would learn that betrayal comes at a price, and I would be the one to collect it. The day of the property viewing loomed like a dark cloud. I knew it was more than just looking at houses. It was a confrontation with the truth about Nathan. As we drove in silence, my mind raced with the reports from the private investigator and the images of Nathan's secret life. The man next to me was a stranger, his charming facade now a grotesque mask. Upon arriving, the property's grandeur was overshadowed by the weight of my impending revelation. Nathan seemed oblivious, lost in visions of a life built on lies and deceit. The real estate agent, Mr. Collins, greeted us with a professionalism that felt cold. His eyes met mine, a silent acknowledgement of the storm brewing beneath the surface. As we toured the lavish rooms, Nathan's excitement was palpable. "Imagine the parties we could have here, Meredith. This is the life we deserve." His words echoed hollowly in my ears. "Deserve? Based on what, Nathan? Your lies? Your illegal activities?" He stopped, a flicker of panic crossing his face. "What are you talking about?" "I know everything, Nathan. The late nights, the criminals, the drugs. You've been living a double life." His facade cracked, revealing a glimpse of the man he truly was. "You've been snooping around? Spying on me?" "Yes, because I needed to know the truth," I said, my voice unwavering. Nathan's expression hardened. "You think you're better than me, Meredith? You think you're above it all with your perfect life and your rich daddy?" The accusation stung, but I stood my ground. "This isn't about me, Nathan. This is about you and the choices you've made." He scoffed, turning away. "You don't understand anything." As he stormed off, Mr. Collins approached me, his expression grave. "I'm sorry you had to find out this way, Mrs. Thompson, but you needed to know the truth." I nodded. My resolve strengthened. "Thank you, Mr. Collins. I needed to see it for myself." Leaving the property, I knew what I had to do. Nathan's betrayal couldn't go unpunished. The man I loved was gone, replaced by a criminal who used me as a stepping stone for his ambitions. That evening, I sat alone in our now tainted home, planning my next move. Nathan's world would come crashing down, and I would be the one to pull the lever. He would pay for his deceit, not just legally, but personally. I would ensure that his fall from grace was as steep as the pedestal he had placed himself upon. The game had changed, and I was no longer a pawn in Nathan's twisted world. I was now the player, and it was my turn to make a move. The next few days were a blur of cold determination. My plan for retribution against Nathan took shape, each step meticulously crafted. I reached out to Mr. Collins, seeking more information and solidifying my resolve. We met in a discreet cafe, the buzz of the city a stark contrast to our somber conversation. "Mrs. Thompson," Mr. Collins began, his voice low, "I've gathered more evidence. It's worse than we thought." He slid a folder across the table. Inside were photos and documents, undeniable proof of Nathan's entanglement in criminal activities. My hands trembled as I leafed through the evidence. How could he be so reckless? "It's greed, Mrs. Thompson. It blinds people," Mr. Collins replied. I looked up, my eyes burning with a mix of fury and sorrow. "I want to bring him down. He can't get away with this." Collins nodded. "I understand. You have my full support." The following day, I confronted Nathan. He returned home, his usual arrogance on display. I was waiting, the folder of evidence in hand. "Nathan, we need to talk," I said, my voice steady. He smirked, unaware of the storm about to break. "What now, Meredith? More accusations?" I threw the folder on the table. "No, not accusations. Proof." His smirk vanished as he flipped through the documents. "Where did you get this? That's not important. What matters is that your lies are over," I said. Nathan's face contorted with rage. "You think you can corner me like this? You're nothing without me, Meredith." His words were like venom, but I stood unshaken. "I was everything before you, and I'll be everything after you're gone. Your time is up, Nathan." He lunged at me, but I was ready. Stepping aside, I let his momentum carry him forward, crashing into the furniture. "Stay away from me," I warned, my heart pounding. Nathan picked himself up, his eyes wild. "You'll pay for this, Meredith. You think you've won? This is far from over." But I could see the fear in his eyes. He knew his world was crumbling. "I'm going to the authorities," I declared. "You're going to face the consequences of your actions." As he stormed out, I knew the battle was just beginning. But I was prepared. Nathan had underestimated me, and that was his biggest mistake. My heart ached with the betrayal and loss, but it was overshadowed by a burning desire for justice. Nathan's fall from grace would be a spectacle, and I would be the architect of his demise. This was more than revenge. It was retribution for every lie, every deceitful smile, every moment he thought he could use me and walk away unscathed. The game of deception was over, and I was writing the final act. Nathan would learn that betrayal comes with a price, and I was here to collect. The day of reckoning arrived with a heavy air. I stood in the living room, the evidence of Nathan's betrayal neatly compiled on the coffee table, waiting for him to return. My heart raced with a mix of fear and anticipation. Today, Nathan's charade would end. The sound of the door opening sent a shiver down my spine. Nathan walked in, his usual confident stride faltering as he saw the determined look in my eyes. "Meredith, what's this about?" he asked, trying to maintain his composure. "It's about the truth, Nathan," I replied, my voice unwavering. "The truth about who you really are." He scoffed, attempting to deflect. "You're being dramatic. Let's just talk this out." I pushed the folder towards him. "Talk? Like how you talked your way into illegal dealings? Or how you talked about love while betraying everything we stood for?" Nathan's facade began to crumble, his eyes betraying a flicker of panic. "Meredith, you don't understand. I did this for us, for our future." "By destroying it?" I countered sharply. "You did this for yourself, Nathan. Your greed, your lies, you've ruined everything." He lunged towards me, his face contorted with rage. "You think you can judge me? You, with your perfect life and your daddy's money?" I stepped back, my resolve hardening. "This isn't about me, Nathan. It's about your crimes, your choices, and now you're going to face the consequences." Nathan's anger turned to desperation. "Meredith, please. We can fix this. I can fix this." But it was too late. "There's nothing left to fix, Nathan. You made your choices, and now you have to live with them." With a trembling hand, I dialed the number I had prepared. Within minutes, the sound of sirens filled the air, and police officers arrived at our door. Nathan's face drained of color as he realized the gravity of the situation. "You called the police?" "Yes, Nathan. It's over," I said, a mix of relief and sorrow washing over me. As the officers handcuffed him, Nathan turned to me, his eyes filled with a toxic combination of anger and disbelief. "You'll regret this, Meredith. You've just made the biggest mistake of your life." But I stood firm, watching as he was led away. The man I had loved was gone, replaced by a stranger whose deceit and greed had consumed him. In the silence that followed, I felt a weight lift off my shoulders. I had done what was necessary, not just for me, but for the justice that Nathan had so callously disregarded. The path ahead would be challenging, but I was ready to face it. Nathan's betrayal had shattered my trust, but it had also revealed a strength in me I never knew I had. As I looked around the empty house, I realized that this was not an end but a beginning of a new chapter, one where I was no longer a victim of deceit but a survivor, ready to rebuild my life on my own terms. The days following Nathan's arrest were a whirlwind of emotions and legal proceedings. Sitting in the courtroom, watching the man I once loved now reduced to a criminal defendant, I felt a complex mix of triumph and heartache. As the judge delivered the verdict, guilty on multiple counts, Nathan's face was a mask of defeat. He turned to look at me, his eyes a mix of anger and despair. In that moment, I saw the remnants of the man I had married, buried under layers of greed and deception. Outside the courtroom, the press swarmed, eager for a statement. I faced them, my voice steady. "Justice has been served today. It's a sad day when someone you trusted betrays not just you, but the law." The following weeks were a time of reflection. I realized that my marriage to Nathan had been built on a foundation of lies. But I also recognized the strength and resilience I had found within myself. I decided to start anew, leaving behind the tainted memories of our shared home. Selling the property, I moved into a smaller, cozier place, one that represented my new beginning. One day, while settling into my new life, I received a call. It was Nathan's parents. They wanted to meet, to apologize for their son's actions. We met at a quiet cafe, and the remorse in their eyes was genuine. "Meredith, we're so sorry for what Nathan did to you," his mother said, her voice quivering. I nodded, acknowledging their pain. "Thank you, but Nathan's choices were his own. You don't need to bear his guilt." His father, a stoic man, handed me an envelope. "We know it can't undo the harm, but please accept this as a token of our apology." I opened the envelope to find a substantial check. I hesitated, then pushed it back. "I appreciate the gesture, but I cannot accept this. Nathan's actions are not your responsibility." Their gratitude was evident, and we parted ways with a mutual understanding and respect. Months passed, and life settled into a new rhythm. The experience with Nathan had changed me, but it had also opened my eyes to my own strength and the importance of trust and integrity. One day, I received news that Nathan had been released on parole. A part of me tensed at the thought of facing him again, but I realized that he no longer had power over me. I had moved on, leaving the shadows of our past behind. I learned that Nathan had started working, trying to rebuild his life. Whether he had truly changed, I didn't know, but it was no longer my concern. My journey had taught me that some people come into our lives as lessons, and Nathan had been my harshest one. As I walked through the park, the sun setting in a brilliant array of colors, I felt a sense of peace. The chapter of my life with Nathan was closed, but my story was far from over. In the end, I had not just survived, I had thrived. And as I looked towards the future, I knew that whatever challenges lay ahead, I was ready to face them with a heart that was stronger, wiser, and more open than ever before.